Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel, but we caught him in the act and terminated him. Terminated him. Terminated him. Terminated him.
The president said last week that there was an attempt to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Here's specifically what he said on Fox News.
I can reveal that I believe it would have been 4 embassies, but Baghdad certainly would have been the lead, but I think it would have been 4 embassies, could have been military bases, could have been a lot of other things too, but it was imminent, and then all of a sudden, he was gone.
Can you clarify, though, was the specific threat that the president shared with Fox News about 4 U.S. embassies being under threat also shared with Congress? Why was there a difference?
What the president said was he believed that it probably and could have been attacks against additional embassies. I shared that view. I know other members of the National Security Team shared that view. That's why I deployed thousands of American paratroopers to the Middle East to reinforce our embassy in Baghdad and other sites throughout the region.
Probably and could have been. That sounds more like an assessment than a specific, tangible threat with a decisive piece of intelligence.
Well, the president didn't say it was a tangible, he didn't cite a specific piece of evidence. He didn't cite a specific piece of evidence. He didn't cite a specific piece of evidence. What he said is he believed.
Are you saying there wasn't one? Are you saying there wasn't one? Are you saying there wasn't one?
I didn't see one. I didn't see one. I didn't see one. I didn't see one. With regard to 4 embassies, what I'm saying is I share the president's view that probably my expectation was they were going to go after our embassies. Embassies are the most prominent display of American presence in a country.
Under my leadership, America's policy is unambiguous to terrorists who harm or intend to harm any American. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its ruthless Quds Force under Soleimani's leadership has targeted, injured, and murdered hundreds of American civilians and servicemen. Soleimani made the death of innocent people his sick passion, contributing to terrorist plots as far away as New Delhi and London. Today we remember and honor the victims of Soleimani's many atrocities, and we take comfort in knowing that his reign of terror is over.
If you want to worry about a state, it shouldn't be Iraq, it should be Iran. But this government, our administration, wanted to worry about Iraq, not Iran. I knew why. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision, we're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." Iran. I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." If you were Iran, you'd probably believe that you were mostly already at war with the United States anyway, since we've asserted that their government needs regime change. And we've asked Congress to appropriate $75 million to do it. And we've asked Congress to appropriate $75 million to do it. And we are supporting terrorist groups, apparently, who are infiltrating and blowing up things inside Iran. And if we're not doing it, let's put it this way, we're probably cognizant of it and encouraging it.
Pentagon's established a special planning group within the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a bombing attack on Iran. This is coming as the Bush administration and Saudi Arabia are pumping money for covert operations into many areas of the Middle East, including Lebanon, Syria, and Iran, in an effort to strengthen Saudi-supported Sunni Islam groups and weaken Iranian-backed Shias. Some of the covert money has been given to jihadist groups in Lebanon with ties to al-Qaeda. Fighting the Shias by funding with Prince Bandar and then with U.S. money not approved by Congress, funding the Sunnis connected to al-Qaeda.
Well, I don't have any direct information to confirm it or deny it. It's certainly plausible. The Saudis have taken a more active role. You know, the Saudis...
You were just in Saudi Arabia. You just came back from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, the Saudis have basically recognized that they have an enormous stake in the outcome in Iraq, and they don't particularly trust the judgment of the United States in this area. We haven't exactly proved our competence. So they're trying to take matters into their own hands. The real danger is, and one of the reasons this is so complicated, is because let's say we did follow the desires of some people who say, just pull out and pull out now. Well, yeah, we could mechanically do that. It would be ugly, and it might take 3 or 4 months, but when you leave, the Saudis have got to find someone to fight the Shias. Who are they going to find? Al-Qaeda. Because the groups of Sunnis who would be extremists and willing to fight would probably be the groups connected to Al-Qaeda. So one of the weird inconsistencies in this is that were we to get out early, we'd be intensifying the threat against us of a super powerful Sunni extremist group, which was now legitimated by overt Saudi funding in an effort to hang on to a toehold inside Iraq and block Iranian expansionism.
Is the United States supporting al-Qaeda in Syria? The answer is yes.
Fact number one, there is no question that al-Qaeda fighters are part of the opposition forces attempting to overthrow Syria's government. Fact number two, the creation of al-Qaeda wasn't Islamic fundamentalism, it was the CIA. The Mujahideen was created by the CIA to cause problems for the Soviets. You might say that's crazy talk, right? Here's Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
To be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting. How? Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of Mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now, everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
So it's not a conspiracy theory, it's history. And it's history that's being repeated in Libya and now in Syria. But there is a bigger problem here, one that every American should be questioning. We're fighting al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, but we're also bombing al-Qaeda targets in Pakistan and in Yemen. And as we do that, something occurs known as collateral damage. Hundreds of civilians in Yemen have been killed in just the first half of 2012 by U.S. airstrikes aimed at al-Qaeda fighters.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia, and we went to work. And it was President Reagan, in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these Mujahideen, and let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia Arabia and other places importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated, they lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest.
So what you need to know tonight is heavy. Our government is bombing sites around the world in an ongoing war with Al-Qaeda. In Iraq, where Al-Qaeda had no presence before the U.S. war, Al-Qaeda is now thriving. The same Al-Qaeda, yes, created by the U.S. government in order to harm the Soviets. And today, at least 13,000 civilians in Afghanistan are dead as a result of that war with Al-Qaeda. Why are we giving Al-Qaeda fighters money and weapons to overthrow yet another government in the Middle East? Today, our government claims they're freeing the people of Syria. Tomorrow, if history tells us anything, we will be killing and wounding civilians in airstrikes and then referring to them as collateral damage in a war with an enemy who we brought to power.
We're in a very, very difficult position in Israel. I say we because every American president has committed to the protection and survival of the state of Israel. Every American president has committed to the protection and survival of the state of Israel. And I think that's right, and I certainly feel that way, and I'm a very strong supporter of Israel.
مسئله صهیونیستی چی میگه؟ از این حیث که میگه یهودی باید برگردن فلسطین بهش میگن مسئله صهیونیستی. مسیحیتیه که میگه ما باید به یهودی‌ها کمک کنیم برگردن فلسطین تا نشانه‌های ظهور محقق شه. چرا؟ چون برداشت ما از انجیل اینه حضرت مسیح تو انجیل این اومده بوده میاد توی معبد سلیمان این یهودی‌ها رو آدم کنه و منجی بودن او رو بپذیرن. این اتفاق افتاده و اونا نپذیرفتن. پس دیگه نشانه ظهور بگید نیست دیگه، محقق شده رفته همون شده. چیکارش بکنن؟ میگن نه یه بار دیگه سکانس رو اجرا میکنیم. بابا جهودی نیست تو فلسطین، از کجا بریم؟ همه رو میکوچانیم. بیت المقدس نیستش، معبد سلیمانی نیست، میسازیمش. روندش رو بخوام بگم و عرضم رو جمع بکنم، گام اول مسیح یهودی، دوره پولس و رنسانس و پروتستان ها، دوره امپریالیستی بریتانیا. گام دوم مسیح یهودی آمریکایی، کوچ کردن رفتن آمریکا، رشد مسیحیت یهودی در آمریکا تا شکل‌گیری اسرائیل. گام سوم احیای دینی و قدرتگیری مسیحیت صهیونیستی، قدرت رسیدن اوانجلیست ها در دهه 70. گام چهارم قدرتگیری راست مسیحی، جریان راست سیاسی مسیح در دهه 80 میلادی. زمامداری ریگان و آمادگی او برای آرماگدون. ریگان میگه من جنگ آرماگدون رو درست میکنم مسیح برگرده، چون تو نشانه‌های مسیحای اوانجلیست اینه که قبلش جنگ جهانی را میفته در هار مجدو، در تپه‌های مجدو در فلسطین. گام پنجم حزب یهوه، شکل‌گیری لابی صهیونیستی. راست مسیحی به علاوه راست سیاسی با هم یکی میشن در حزب جمهوری خواه در دوره بوش پدر و کلینتون و آمادگی برای سال 2000 و نظم نوین جهانی. گام ششم تلاش برای جایگزین کردن نظام سیاسی منطبق با کتاب مقدس توی آمریکا. برای همین شما دقت کردید ترامپ برای اینکه رأی بیاره، میدونید که رأی اینا پشت سر ترامپ بود. شرطشون هم برای ترامپ این بود باید پایتخت انتقال بده و ترامپ هم عمل کرد. هیچ کدوم رئیس جمهور آمریکا جرئت نکردن، قول میدادن عمل نمیکردن چون میترسیدن. گام هفتم نقش در سیاست خارجی و جنگ افروزی‌های جهانی و حمله به سازمان ملل برای تغییر مرزها و شکلگیری نظم نوین جهانی اورشلیمی. تو پیشگویی‌های اینها برای اینکه مسیح ظهور کنه خودشون ساختن ها. میگن قبلش باید دنیا رو سیاهی بگیره. گروه‌هایی میان شروع میکنن سربریدن. 7 سال آشوب، بعد حضرت عیسی میاد میره کجا؟ تو بیت المقدس، تو معبد سلیمان. به یهودیان میگه من مسیحم، قبولم میکنید؟ میگن آره، همه چی خوبی خوشی تموم میشه. حضرت عیسی یه طرف، دجال هم یه طرف با رفیقاش، با اون کسی که 7 سال با پیروانش با 7 سال آشوب درست کردن، با هم جنگ جهانی آرماگدون شکل میگیره. و اینا تو مرحله آخر این قصه شونن. مرحله آخر چیه؟ خراب کردن بیت المقدس.
This may be the most important prophetic spot in the entire Bible, because the final act of the book of Revelation is going to begin right here at this place. The Bible teaches that Russia, Iran, Ethiopia, Libya, Turkey, and other nations will come down under a UN flag, and they will invade Israel at this particular point.
The horrific multinational fighting this preacher is describing is the Battle of Armageddon, which is supposed to happen right here, just as soon as Israel is a fully Jewish state. Just as soon as Israel is a fully Jewish state. Just as soon as Israel is a fully Jewish state. Which is why a bunch of Christians in Texas have become the most fervent Zionists on God's green earth. While most Americans probably think that the pro-Israeli lobby is largely a Jewish thing, actually the most of its support comes from right here in the Bible Belt, where evangelical Christians overwhelmingly believe that Israel has a right to exist because God said so.
Go to the phone right now and call that number and say, yes, I'm going to stand with Israel. I'm going to bless the people of the Bible. I'm going to bless God's chosen people.
Will those of you in this audience who support the state of Israel stand to your feet and give a shout of support?
While a lot of Israel's financial support does come from Jewish wallets, there are close to 70 million evangelicals in America versus less than 14 million Jews worldwide. And given that roughly 80% of these Christians support Israel, that makes American Christians the largest pro-Israeli voting bloc in the world, about 4 times the size of the Jewish community on Earth. There's a lot of money behind the Christian Zionist movement. This church behind me, Cornerstone, is one of the biggest supporters of Israel, not just among Christians, but in the world. The pastor here, John Hagee, has raised an estimated $70 million over the course of his ministry.
God gave them that land. They own that land.
According to their interpretation of the Bible, Jewish control of the Holy Land will lead directly to the second coming of Christ.
The word Armageddon is actually 2 words, Har Megiddo, or Hill of Megiddo. You are standing on the Hill of Megiddo right now. The final act of the book of Revelation is going to begin right here at this place. And when Israel's about to be defeated, the Bible tells us that Jesus Christ himself will intervene. It says it this way: the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God. He is going to defeat the Antichrist. He's going to defeat the false prophet. Both of them will be cast alive into the lake of fire. At that time, Satan is going to be bound for the next 1,000 years, and we are going to crown Jesus Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم.
حرف آخر را اول میزنم. انتقام میگیریم. سخت، محکم، پشیمان کننده، قاطع و تمام کننده. مطمئن باشید، آرام باشید.
حالا یه سیلی دیشب به اینها زده شد. بایستی حضور فساد برانگیز آمریکا در این منطقه منتهی بشه، تمام بشه.
انتقام میگیریم، اما اگر حرکت دیگری انجام دهند، آنجا را که دوست دارند و به آن عشق می‌ورزند، به آتش می‌کشند.